But we live with more than just physical answers from the past.
When any good attitude or concept or system worked well, we hung on to it. We preserve representative democracy, intended for a time when only a few could get to the capital to speak for the many. Modern finance was designed in the 17th century. Literacy as a test of intelligence came in the 15th century. The idea of progress is 19th century. And yet all those things are part of our mental furniture today, because when the answer to a question, the solution to a problem suits us, we kind of institutionalize it so that it won't change even when we do. The business of questioning itself has been institutionalized like that, in the kind of place Jodrell Bank Telescope belongs to, a university.
If we are what we know, then this is where we pass on what we are to the next generation. And in the interests of safety, to keep the boat from being rocked too much, we teach the young to ask questions that have in the main already been answered.
Tristram Shandy asks us to help write the novel, but in so doing we write ourselves.
Good, I like that. Particularly, I think, what you said about time.
And to make sure we've passed on the view of how things are unmistakably, we test. After all, that's the only way you can be sure they know what they're supposed to know.
The oldest answers to the most basic questions about how to operate are common to virtually every culture on the planet. Because at the simplest level, every culture needs to keep order, especially this kind.
Oui, oui, oui. Là, c'est bien, c'est bien. Là, oui. C'est bien, c'est bien, c'est bien.
This is one of the things in life we protect most against being changed when knowledge changes us. We protect it by turning it into a ritual.
Monsieur Jean-Luc Reynaud, consentez-vous à prendre pour l'épouse Mademoiselle Anne Sabine Cruzy, ici présente? Oui.
When you get married, or buried, get christened, or anything else too important to play by ear, the event is turned into a kind of play, where everybody gets a role they act out. It's a kind of public agreement to stick to the general rules about whatever it is. The people doing it are effectively saying, no matter what else may change, we won't rock the boat. We're not Maverick. You can trust us. Expressions of approval follow.
Vous donnez la main droite?
Most of these ritual ways of answering a social need that we got from the past look like it. They include something from an ancient rite. In this case, the old symbol of fertility, the ring. And then it's all done in the presence of a supernatural being, a god. So the agreement is also made under what was once a real threat of heavenly retribution if you broke your promise later on. Some things, this ritual says, must be permanent. Rituals, if you like, permit change to happen, like the change in the status of the two people involved here. But it's change strictly by the book. Ceremonial, formal, nerve-wracking.
Phew is usually the feeling at this point. Well, a ritual wouldn't be much of a ritual if you didn't feel you'd been put through the ringer, would it? So, now it's official in every sense. The new order of things, two are now one, gets public recognition. And for just a few minutes, limited disorder is permitted.
Mind you, most of the rituals in life don't involve a booze-up. In most cases, if something becomes common enough to turn into a ritual and then starts to involve really large numbers of people, that's when the ritual becomes something else. It becomes widespread enough to affect that general agreement we all share. So that's when the responsibility for running it goes out of your hands
To be taken over by the institutions set up to run the rituals that matter on a regular basis, so that people can have clear rules and regulations to follow if they decide to get up to that particular ritual. The institutions take the admin out of daily life and run it for you. Banking, government, sewage, tax collecting. Or, if you break the rules and regulations, one institution can take you out of daily life. This one. In every community, the law, whether it's dressed up like this or the village elders telling you what the local custom is, the law is all those rules I was on about earlier.
Meneer Faber, bent u Willem Faber, oud 61 jaar, geboren in Den Haag.
Dat klopt, meneer de president.
Officier van justitie.
This may be double Dutch to you, but you get the point.
Meneer de president, leden van de rechtbank. Meneer Faber staat voor u terecht.
I suppose what institutions like this do, most of all, is the dirty work. While they're putting them away here in the law court, for instance, that leaves us free to get on with making money, having a career, and avoiding the social responsibility stuff these people have to deal with. And after a few centuries of this buck passing, the institutions get big and powerful and reach into everybody's life so much they become hard to alter and virtually impossible to get rid of.
Deurwaarder, graag de eerste getuige.
Meneer de president, de eerste getuige.
The name of the game here, and in all the institutions that run your life, is keeping order. Because if the institutions didn't do that, it would be the end of civilization as we know it, wouldn't it? So the institutions are usually old-fashioned, don't like change. Well, we all like to know where we stand, don't we? I mean, you wouldn't want this place to make up the rules as it went along, would you?
The extreme way to protect yourself against change and keep total order in the face of awkward questions is to do it the way they do it in Eastern communities, where, say, Buddhism is a way of life. In that case, you're not bothered by questions because you're not looking for answers. Basically, all the answers of Buddhist needs were found over 2,000 years ago. Their explanation of the universe is set in theological concrete. And in any case, it's a universe that doesn't change, so there's no need to go looking for change in it. The reason this culture is not like ours is because, like us, they are what they know. But since what they know doesn't change, they don't. The symbols and monuments that surround them are a part of their daily living. To our way of looking at it, they don't live with bits of the past affecting them. They live in the past. The Nepalese way of life reflects their lack of interest in novelty. They don't change, not because they're backward, but because they don't want to. We, on the other hand, do. And that gives us a problem. In spite of the way institutions can act like a safety barrier against the effects of change, because of the way we've made asking questions one of our institutions, we do something that doesn't appear to make sense.
Where other societies do things, organize themselves to keep things the way they are, we, because of our rationalist beginnings back in Greece, create places like this,
to do exactly the opposite, to make waves, to rock the boat, to ask questions knowing that the answers will change things. It's a scientific research lab.
This inverter, which has to drive the signal up through about 5,000 microns of metal and about 2,000 of poly. Right. You had to get a Calcon.
The difference between the modus simulation and the advice modus isn't quite as accurate.
It will not match this data in time.
In places like this, we've institutionalized the business of change itself. And as with the other institutions, this kind has taken root ever since science first started affecting our daily lives. Today, the mysterious world of the research lab comes up with so many answers so fast that only a few insiders know what the question was. If, as I said earlier, we are what we know, then this particular kind of institution spends its working hours finding ways to make things that will sooner or later change what we are, our view. Once it took decades, even centuries, for us to change. Now, it could happen with every new discovery. But these places aren't just here to design fancy new gizmos. These semi-independent scientific communities spend as much of their effort involved in the kind of abstract theoretical thinking that may never have an application. But you never know.
What they produce is ultimately approved by us, or not, when it gets onto the market. If what they make doesn't sell, then the kind of change it would have brought wasn't the kind of change we wanted. Problem is, we often don't know what they produce because it's not the kind of thing you'd know about, unless you read scientific magazines. As often as not, the product changes the way we do things rather than the things themselves. They modify the world around us. Like you still go on using lifts, they just work differently. The buildings still go up. They're just built with different construction techniques. The point about all this technological pizzazz isn't the gee-whiz high-tech stuff. It's the secondary effects of using it. Take, say, what this chip could do to change the pattern of work. With this, you could have telecommuting. That's where you work at home from a screen and you never go into the office. Great. No more rush hour. But what does that do to the public transportation system and the taxes it uses? Or to the car manufacturers and their workers' jobs and the rest of the economy that depends on their output? Or to the concept of the city itself, with its support systems and businesses? Or to the downtown property values where maybe your pension fund's invested? Not to speak of working at home day in, day out and what that might do to a marriage. And what do you get out of work when it's only you? What would be the effect of isolating and fragmenting the community like that from just one application of this microchip? And every innovation modifies life like that. And our culture's been doing it for 1,000 years. That's the way we are. And it shows. Look at any Western city, and you'll see a culture trying to come to terms with constant change.
Look at the detail of your hometown, or this place, and you see the way people saw things in the past, and how different their views were to ours. You can still see those attitudes because of what they left behind them. Some of those past views lasted long enough and were so certain of themselves that they left behind really major bits of evidence of what they thought was important. Look at this, for instance. 19th century San Francisco built churches and believed in heroes. How many statues do we build to honor great men today? And look at the public buildings of the period, almost imperial. And they obviously didn't think things were going to change much, or they wouldn't have built like this, for a view that obviously thought it would last as long as the Greeks did. Today, power lies with the quick fix, with the marketplace and big business. And where once a home was a house, today it's a box in a skyscraper. We've gone from this way of looking at things to this in a generation. Now people work at night because somewhere else on the planet it's not night.
Train 238 Central. That's 10-4. Your route is coming up. I'm receiving the train now.
Train currently at Coliseum.
The public transit system exists to deliver millions of people to their work every day, like an extension of the production line process that runs the modern world and that everybody has to fit into, and that changed the meaning of work 200 years ago when it first happened. Life now is working to buy this year's model because last year's is last year's.
Good morning and welcome to the absolute ultimate radio program.
And everywhere, freeways, expressways, throughways, all to make it easier for everybody to go places faster and in greater comfort than they were able to only yesterday. We live caught between more and more change and less time to adapt to it. We believe in the right of the individual to do his thing, but at the same time, we change what that thing is all the time. So, this is what questioning has brought us. If we are what we know, then what we are in the modern West is unsure about how long it'll be before what we know is out of date.
See how a culture reveals itself by what it does. All that evidence about ours, down there. You can read it like a book, and in our case, the message you get is that the only constant in life is change. Not just in the physical shape of the world around, in standards, attitudes, ethics, values, morals, all shifting. The inevitable end product of that Greek rationalism I talked about earlier is all around you. It's our world of here today and gone tomorrow.
I said at the beginning, all cultures think their view is worth defending to the death. But we, more than most, are split between yesterday and tomorrow, defending a way of life that is by definition a question mark.